Hello, welcome to the instructions for Module 14. Module 14 will be focusing on Chapter 15 of your OER. This is the chapter that deals with psychological disorders. You will be completing the usual assignments of the module, which include a Module 14 discussion post, as well as a Module 14 quiz. Make sure to read Chapter 15 of the OER. Make sure to review carefully the PowerPoints associated with this chapter. I want to talk to you about psychological disorders, but before I do that, I'd like you to think about some of the symptoms that people typically have in a regular life. So sometimes students read chapter 15 and they get a bit concerned because they feel that some of the symptoms that are associated with psychological disorders seem to describe them. And that's okay to feel that way. As a matter of fact, we look at symptomology as a continuum. Take, for example, the symptom of anxiety. We all experience anxiety. And that level of anxiety fluctuates sometimes on a daily basis. Then there may be some days where you feel very low anxiety. That's what we are thinking about when we look at a continuum. Think of low anxiety to high anxiety. Now, if you experience high anxiety, this does not necessarily mean you have a psychological disorder. In fact, many life experiences cause high anxiety. The issue becomes when you have symptoms that chronically disrupt the regular functioning of your life. And even in those instances, sometimes that is short-term and a reaction to a major life event. Now, if you are highly concerned about showing multiple signs that interrupt your daily functioning, you always have access to services as a student. Sometimes those services can be in the health center or the psychological wellness center. And I encourage you to reach out to those centers if you feel that you need help in dealing with psychological issues. The next thing I'd like to talk to you about for this chapter is the difference between clinical disorders and personality disorders. When we're thinking about clinical disorders, the DSM-5 gives us categories of disorders that are described by specific symptoms, prevalence, cause, and the way those disorders affect people's lives. Now, a clinical disorder can include something like major depression, obsessive-compulsive disorder, schizophrenia spectrum. And what neuroscience and leading research has showed us is that clinical disorders are linked to biological issues in the brain and the body. This means that oftentimes clinical disorders can be treated through the use of medication. Medication begins a neurochemical change that tends to help alleviate symptoms. Let's contrast that with personality disorders. The DSM-5 also gives various personality disorders. You can think of something like obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, narcissism, just to name a few. What appears to be the major difference between clinical and personality disorders is that personality disorders appear to be highly influenced by the environment that an individual is raised in. It's almost as if somebody has learned how to behave and think in a specific way. When we're looking at treatment, this becomes a little bit more difficult because we don't see medication necessarily helping those with personality disorders. Instead, treatment involves a long-term investment in changing the ways that somebody lives their life. Many times, people with personality disorders don't even see their own problems. They believe that their issues have to do with the world around them. This is really important to keep into consideration as we're looking at the difference between the different types of clinical and personality disorders. We'll talk a bit more about treatment when we reach the next module. I will see you back in the instructions for Module 15.